But you know the other thing nobody said? Nobody said they'd give it away. And see, if we had $1 million, you know what we'd do with it? Give it away. we would give it away. That's the whole point in this.
Welcome to Church of the Rock from Winnipeg. Stay tuned to this week's thought-provoking message from Pastor Mark Hughes.
All right, so here we are. Once again, we are at our annual pie auction, raising funds for the 1040 window. And this year, our theme is, If We Had $1 Million. And of course, I'm basing that on the hit song from 1988 by the Bare Naked Ladies. You all remember that song. And it's sort of a funny song. I don't know why it was a hit. It's so goofy, but people loved it. And they go through the things that they would do if they had $1 million. And they would buy a house and a car and appliances and furniture and a tree fort in the backyard and a fur coat and a monkey. Not sure where the monkey fits in, but if you have $1 million, you buy a monkey. Anyway, here's where I want to talk about, because, you know, they did a survey on this, and they asked people, they asked 2,000 people, they said, if you had $1 million, what would you do with it? And guess what they said they'd do with it? They said most people, they said they'd spend it, and they would buy a house and a car and appliances and furniture, and they went on and on, said almost all the same things, except nobody said they would buy a monkey. Not one single person. But you know the other thing nobody said? Nobody said they'd give it away. And see, if we had $1 million, you know what we'd do with it? Give it away. we would give it away. That's the whole point in this. And why are we talking about that? Because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to raise $1 million. And here's what it's all about. It's all about the 1040 window. Now, 1040 window, I'll tell you where it is and I'll tell you what it is. So here it is. It's 10 degrees north by 40 degrees north through Africa and Asia. The term 1040 window was coined by a missiologist by the name of Louis Bush in 1990. And he said, these are the most unreached people with the gospel in the world. 50% of the world's population lives in that strip. 80% of the world's poverty. 93% of the unreached peoples who have not heard the gospel of Jesus Christ live in the 1040 window. Yet, only 7% of missions giving goes to the 1040 window. Did you see the inverse proportion there? 7% for 93. And I remember when we started looking at this back in the 90s, and we thought, we need to do something. We as a church need to do something to help out this area. And so we were talking about, we thought, we were terrible at fundraising as a church and terrible at missions giving back in the 90s. We really were. And so we got together and we were chatting about this, and we said, what could we do? Our people were all young families, young kids, all struggling to make ends meet. And we thought, how could we raise some money for the 1040 window? And someone came up with the idea, let's have a bake sale. So we talked about that, and we said, you know, when we did it, we thought, well, you know how much money we would make with a bake sale? Like $80. You don't make any money on bake sales. They're like the worst. So I said, well, what if we did this? What if we made it an auction? And we auctioned off the items, and we tried to get people to pay more than they were worth, not what they were worth. And what if we did it? We called it a pie auction. What if we did this? So we brought in a bona fide auctioneer, and we did our very first, and everybody could do that. Everybody could make a pie. So they all made a pie. And so every family brought a pie, and every family bought a pie. And we were selling, this is honest to God truth, the prices went from $15 to a grand high of $40. I actually remember I paid $40 for that. It was a peach pie, tasted like wood chips, but you know, not everybody knows how to make pie apparently. And so anyway, we ended up raising $1,200 though. And we were really happy about it. We sent $1,200 to the 1040 window. So we did it again the next year, and something happened. We had a catalytic moment is what happened. So we were bidding away, and we had a pie up to $90. And I'll tell you what it was. Remember Perkins Restaurant used to have those fancy pies they used to have in the cooler in the front, and they would have like Reese's peanut butter cups on top of them. We had one of those with Reese's peanut butter cups on top. So everybody was bidding on it, and we got it up to $90. We had never seen such generosity like that. And then all of a sudden, someone at the back jumped to their feet and said, I'll give you $200 for that pie if I can throw it in Pastor Mark's face. The auctioneer went, sold! Didn't even ask. And he got that pie and he marched right up on the stage. It was in our old building there. He marched right up on the stage and pow! Right in. There was chocolate and muck all over. I was wearing a suit. I was just covered. You know what? It was delicious. They were really yummy. I was eating it off my face and off my jacket. And anyway, what happened was that moment caused a breakthrough, and people all of a sudden realized what we were trying to do. It wasn't about the pie in the face. It was about the fact of being extraordinarily and audaciously generous to raise money for missions. And so that year we raised $2,000, and we just kept on going. And we thought this would last a few years, but the next year we raised $4,000, then the next year $8,000, and then next year we doubled almost every single year, year after year. Here we are 20-some years later, and we're still going. But then it started to slow down, not in the sense of slowing down. It didn't slow down, but it was pretty hard to double when you're at 300,000. It's hard to get 400,000 or 600, 800 the next year. So last year we made a decision. We were bringing in around $400,000. And we thought, what if we had $1 million? And we came up with this idea that whatever we raised, up to $500,000, we would double it out of our general fund. And so last year we did that. And we figured we might be able to raise $500,000 from the congregation and our TV viewers. And at the end of the year, are you ready for this? We actually raised $600,000. We added the 500 to it, and we gave $1.1 million last year to the 10-4 window. And then we have, this far, since our history as a church, we have now given over $11 million to the 1040 window. And $26 million to missions and outreach worldwide and across Canada. I mean, this is an extraordinary amount of money that you've been part of. And our missions giving from our budget every year, if you ever look at our financial statements, 30% of our entire budget goes to missions and outreach. I don't know very many churches that have that kind of commitment. I'll tell you, that's the reason people love this church, because we're not just all about putting carpet on the floor and curtains on the windows. We're about giving to the most unreached people in the world. And so this year, we talked to our board of directors, and we said, let's do the double again. Let's do the double once again, but this time there's no limits. And so if you kick in 700,000, we'll go to 1.4. If you put in $1 million, we'll add how much? $1 million. And then you have $2 million. How exciting does that sound? That is very exciting. If there's a way to double it, why wouldn't you double it? So I got to tell you a little story about this. So it's Christmas Day, and Grandpa's doing a little game. You know how Grandpas play these games. And he held up a $10 bill and a $20 bill, and he said to little Johnny, you can have whichever one you want. And he took the $10 bill. And Grandpa laughed his head off. He thought that was the dumbest thing he'd ever seen. And so he went to one of the aunts and said, look how dumb this kid is. And he did it again. And little Johnny took the $10 bill again. So he went to one of the uncles and said, look how dumb this kid is. Held up the 10 and the 20. And Johnny took the 10 again. And after about 9 or 10 of these, the father was embarrassed and goes up and says, Johnny, what are you doing? You do know the difference between a 10 and a 20, don't you? He says, sure, Pop. Use your head. If I'd taken the 20, do you think you would have played the game 10 more times? That's a true story. It happened last Christmas, and I was Grandpa. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into the scripture. We're going to look at a little verse here that is very insightful, and we're in the RSV version. It's Luke chapter 6, verse 9. It says this, and I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous mammon, so that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal habitations. So Jesus tells us to make friends with unrighteous mammon. Unrighteous mammon is this term that Jesus uses from time to time that is not money per se. See, there's nothing intrinsically evil about money. Unrighteous mammon is something that Jesus refers to the wealth and the excess and the affluence of this world and how it grabs a hold of people. And it becomes so powerful in people's lives, he personifies it. And he says, you cannot serve both God and mammon. So that's what mammon is. And then he says this, when it fails. And what he's telling us is that one day mammon, money even, is going to fail. And you know that because you've read Revelation chapter 18, and it says in 1 hour, the world's economic system is going to come down. I know some of you are thinking, what? What about my RSPs? Yeah, what about them? and then he says, here's what I want you to do. He says, I want you to make friends for yourself with your money so that they may welcome you into eternal habitations. You know what that's talking about? That's talking about giving to missions and giving to the gospel so that people that you will never meet this side of heaven, you will never meet them, but you will one day be greeted by them in heaven because of what you did in the pie auction. There's people that are going to go to heaven because of that. You understand this, right? It's pretty simple stuff. And when it comes to missions, there's only two kinds of people. There's those who go to missions, and who would be the other people? Those who would send, right? And I know that most in this room are not going to go. So that means that you have a responsibility to send. And so that's why we do this. And that's why we give extraordinary amounts of money to missions. And that's why it's so important to us, because there's a world that is lost, and most of us aren't going to go. So we're going to have to send. And that's why we're going to have, we can't give $10 or $20 to this. We've got to think in terms of, we've got to give extraordinary and extravagantly if we're going to see this, because there's no better investment than the souls of people that are going to greet us there someday. So let me talk about, I don't have the time to go through all the projects. We have over 30 projects we're doing this year. So I only have time to highlight a few, but let me show you the 1040 window once again. So there's that part of the world, and we're going to zoom in on all the countries we're working in. I just want you to take a moment and look at that. We're still helping them out in Ukraine, by the way, up there. We're working way down there in the Philippines and Indonesia and Malaysia, China, great things happening in China, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Somalia. The list goes on and on and on. I just want you to know we're involved in all these places. You can go to our website. You can read about everything we are doing in these particular places and the partners. We have some amazing partners around the world that are doing things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight a couple of things today, a few things, a handful of these projects, just to bring you up to speed. So first of all, I want to talk to you about unreached people groups. We mention them quite a bit. And unreached people groups are ethno-linguistic groups somewhere in the world that do not have the gospel, they do not have a Bible in their native tongue, in whatever their dialect is. And there's some 6,700 languages in the world, and there's still another 2,000 that are still unreached. They don't have a Bible, and they don't have a church in that language as well. And so we've been partnering with groups that go into those parts of the world and translate the Bible into their languages. And we've worked in many, 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 many nations all over the 1040 window. And currently we have 3 projects going in India, and we have 2 projects going in Cameroon. But we've worked in a number of little places, and I want to give you an update because I have a story. You haven't heard this story, trust me, when I get to the end of this. But you know some of this history. So we've been working in Nepal. So let's have a look at Nepal, just so everybody remembers where it is. It's just north of India, that little country up there, right at the base of the Himalayas, where Mount Everest is. And so we started working in Nepal probably 16, 17 years ago. And we have sponsored many, many people groups for a language, and they get their Bible. And we've done some Old Testaments there as well. And in 2016, Kathy and I went to Kathmandu. We went to Nepal, and we met this man. I want to introduce him to you. Some of you will remember this, and that's Simon. I'm the tall guy. He's the shorter one. And just in case you're not sure which was which. And Simon is a little bit of the Paul the Apostle of Nepal. And once a year, he straps on his hiking boots and that knapsack, and he starts walking through the trails. They call it trekking in Nepal. And there's very few roads in Nepal. There's some main roads, but the majority of people have to walk to their town or their village. And it's not uncommon for them to walk 2 or 3 days. And there's villages like this all over the place. And you just walk, and eventually you come across another village, another village, another village. And so Simon will literally walk through Nepal looking for unreached peoples. He's a linguist, so he has an ear for languages. And there's dozens and dozens of dialects other than Nepali that are in Nepal. And so one day he's out doing his annual trek And he hears this language, this dialect he's never heard before, and he goes and he greets these people in Nepali. A lot of them speak in Nepali as well. And so he asked them what language that was, and they told him, and he asked them, are there any Christians that live in this community? And they said, yeah, there was one family. It's another fantastic story I don't have time to tell. So when we were there, what he did was did this conference, and he invited us to speak at it, and he had 9 different people groups from all over the foothills of the Himalayas. And they were in this place, and this one group was there, the Maha people, which he had met that day. And there was the one family, and here they are. They were all a family. They were the only Christians in this whole community of 3,600 people of the Mara language. And so this is day one. We were there, and they're just talking about the possibility of translating a Bible into their native tongue. So it began, and as it were, Church of the Rock and some other churches in the city funded the project. And 3 months ago, are you ready for this? They dedicated the Bible to that Maori people. They have a church there now in the community. It's got probably 75 to 100 people in it. They've got a pastor in that community. It's growing. They're reaching people. So I have one little story to tell you about that community. There was a man there. His name was Abir. And Abir was actually orphaned at the age of 3, and he had to go live with his grandparents. And he lived, and this happens sometimes, he lived with a sense of abandonment for all of these years that, he didn't have parents, and he was being raised by these elderly grandparents and stuff. And as a young man and as a young adult, he suffered with depression and anxiety. And when he was 28 years old, he decided to take his own life. And he went behind some trees, and he took out a knife, and he actually sliced his throat, and he fell down waiting to die. And 2 Christians from this community saw him and found him and rushed him to a doctor, and the doctor managed to stop the bleeding and save the man's life. And then they sat there praying beside him for 2 days until he came to, and he came to, and he tried to figure out what was going on. They said, we found you, we brought you here, and they've saved your life, and we've been praying for you. And then they handed him the Bible that I just showed you. They handed him the Bible in his native tongue. And he started to read the Bible as he was recovering, and he didn't get any further than the book of Matthew. And he came across the verse that says, all you who are labor and are heavy laden, come to me and I will give you rest. And that was all he needed to know, and he gave his heart to Jesus, and he's part of the church community that you sponsored. Let's give Jesus a big shout for that. So if we had $1 million, I would want us to reach unreached people groups. How about you? So let's talk some more about this. So if we had $1 million, I think we should try to reach the most populous nation in the world, which incidentally is no longer China. What country is it? India. It's now India. 1.4 billion people now living in the Indian subcontinent, and hundreds, probably I think something 360 languages, dialects in this country. So lots of unreached people. So we're busy. We're sponsoring 3 unreached people groups in India alone, just much like what I just told you about Nepal. But there's a couple of stories I want to tell you, because this community, this country is ripe for the gospel. And we have an organization we work with, and they do these crusades. They call them mini crusades and festivals. And the mini crusades, here's a picture of a festival. The mini crusades get a few hundred people out, and they cost $100 is all they cost. The festivals like this that you're looking at, they get 3,000 to 4,000 people out. They will get probably 10% of them that are first-time decisions to follow Christ. So that's roughly 350 people. And those festivals cost, are you ready for this? $350. Now, you're pretty smart people. Tell me how much that is per soul. Anybody know? Really? Come on, somebody shout it out. It's $1. Someone said a cent. No, it's not a cent. It's $3.50 divided by $3.50. It's $1. Is what it is. And so just do the math. I mean, we're not going to do this, but how much would it cost us to reach 1 million people? No, it's $1 million. Now say it, please, or I'm not going to move on. You're wearing out people. Don't wear out on me. And one more thing we're doing in India. So there's several things, but there's another thing we're doing. So many of you know your geography of India, know that Kashmir is the province up in the north, and it's actually 96% Muslim. And there's a missionary there by Jonathan who's been sort of on my case to sponsor his project that I had trouble understanding. I think I finally figured it out. And what he is doing is he's taking widows and the orphans, or consequently their children, and he's taking them into this community. And this is what he does. He finds them housing, he provides them food, he helps with their children's education, and then he buys them sewing machines, and they go into a little cottage industry. You can see and their faces are covered, so you can't see them for security reasons because we're in Muslim northern India there. But you can see the sewing machine, you can see the fabric, and what it is it's sort of like a microloan to get them a little business going so they can become self-sufficient. So last year we sponsored this project, and they added 174 widows and their children to this community. And they're now servicing 400 widows and 800 children. So you do the math, there's 1,200 people in this community. And they told me that 100% of them have come to Christ. So if we had $1 million, I'd want to take care of the orphans and the widows in India. How about you? So if I had $1 million, if we had $1 million, I think I'd want to do something in Uganda, right? I mean, Uganda is one of these countries. We've been working hard in Uganda, and you know this. We have long-term partnerships, probably going back 15 or 20 years with African Renewal Ministries. Peter is the head of this organization. He's a fantastic, honest, incredible leader. They have planted over 1,000 churches. And every year, our pastor, Dwayne, takes a team there, and we do a number of different things. We have worked with orphanages, and we've put in wells, and we put in generators. We've just done one thing after another. In fact, every month we sponsor church planters that go out through Uganda and plant churches. It goes on and on. And what our team does when they go, amongst other things, is they do medical missions. And most of these places can't get proper medical care. So last year we did 2 there, and we ministered to 4,800 people for medical care. And so they'll either set up a tent like this, or they'll do it in a church like this. And Church of the Rock pays for all the medical supplies, and there's different things going on. We have doctors and nurses and dentists that volunteer for this. And one of the most heartbreaking things is you see the little children, when they get malaria, they'll often die because they can't get medication. Completely curable disease. And so these little girls are here getting injections, and every year they come back with stories of 100 or so babies whose lives were literally saved because of the treatment that they got. And so, if we had $1 million, wouldn't you want to do medical care in Uganda? Yeah, you would. So I've got one more little project I want to talk about in Uganda. So they're planting all these churches, and these churches are building the buildings because bricks are easy and brick laying is easy. They can do that. What they can't do is they can't put a roof on it. The roof is too expensive. You've got to do it all at once. They can't pay for the timber. They can't pay for the metal to do this. And so last year when we were there, no, that's not the wrong, well, yeah, so let's talk about this one for a minute. That's fine. So here's what happens. So they build this building with no roof. And I think we have another one of the inside of that. There we go. And so it's sitting there waiting for a roof. And sometimes they'll meet in these churches even without a roof. But last year we were there, we put a roof on one of these. And so here's the pictures. These are all taken by our team that were there. This roof was going up. The trusses were going up. Just scroll through these pictures. And so then you got the roof half up, and then a little further on, and almost done. And last one, boom, finished. Isn't that fantastic? And you paid for that. And sometimes they'll build the walls around an existing church. Show that picture of that one where they got this little church, so we built the bigger church. And so they'll build a bigger church around it, and then they'll tear that one down and reuse the material somewhere else. And so apparently there's dozens of these churches all across Uganda that don't have roofs. And so they said, would Church of the Rock considering doing more than one roof a year? Now, because of logistical reasons, we can only do about 10 of them. So here's what we want to do. If you will donate $5,000, I want to challenge some of you. If you'll donate $5,000, the first $5,000 that comes in for this, we will double it. That'll be $10,000 and you can buy a roof. And so that's my little challenge for you today, that the first 10 people or families that do that, we're going to get you 10 roofs. How cool does that sound? All right, we got to move along here. Real quickly, South Sudan. South Sudan is an incredibly destitute nation. They got their independence in 2011, but they've been in civil war ever since. There's been 400,000 people killed in this civil war, and the average age of someone living in South Sudan is 17 years old. And there's 2 million displaced people, and we talk about Gaza, and we talk about Ukraine and the humanitarian crisis there, and nobody talks about South Sudan. And so we have a number of people that are working there. We have some Canadians there, actually, that are actually, they got land from the warlords, and they're actually helping teaching them agriculture so that they can grow food and become self-sufficient. And then one of the most effective things that anybody ever does has been the Jesus film. And they'll gather people at night, and they'll set up a projector. And you all remember the Jesus film. Here's the picture of it. It was produced in 1979 by Campus Crusade for Christ. Cost them $6 million to produce it. It has been viewed, are you ready for this? By 4 billion people worldwide. It has become the most effective evangelistic tool in the history of mankind, and they estimate 633 million people have come to Christ as a result. And so that's what's going on in South Sudan, and you're part of that. Last and final stop on this little whirlwind tour is outside of the 1040 window, and it's in El Salvador. And I just want to give you an update on this, because this was the first year we did this project in El Salvador. Let me remind you of the history here. So they were in a civil war in the 80s, and the U.S. was backing the civil war, and they ended up importing tens of thousands of gang members from El Salvador. They were all living in Los Angeles. And they were called the MS-13, and they were easy to spot because they love artwork, and they would let you know. And what happened in 2000 was Bill Clinton signed an executive order and deported every last one of them they could round up and sent them back to El Salvador. 40,000 of these gang members had been back down in El Salvador, and it became the single most dangerous country in the entire world. Murders, rapes, violence, just completely out of control. And the new government made this decision that they were going to round up these gang members and they were going to throw them in prison. And so they did. They just went and rounded them up one after another. They built the world's largest prison. They called it the mega prison. They put 62,000 prisoners in this. Well, it caused a huge upheaval in the community because a lot of them were fathers and had families and et cetera. And consequently, the first thing that happened last year was we bought 1,200 study Bibles for pastors to go in and minister to these prisoners, and 10,000 Bibles for the prisoners. And now what's happened, there's been this huge outpouring. You can see these men coming to Christ behind these bars, and an incredible revival has happened. So this year we've been asked to do something. We've been asked if we would look into getting Bibles into the hands of the children that have been orphaned as a result of this whole disaster that's happened there. There's 6,500 of them that have no parents at all. They're completely orphaned. And so there's these churches there that are working together to reach these kids and putting this Bible in their hand. They asked for $55,000 to try to get them in the hands of tens of thousands of young people. And I was thinking about that, and I thought that's what it's all about. It's about reaching the next generation, isn't it? And so if we had $1 million, I'd want to put Bibles in the hands of kids in El Salvador. How about you? So that's just a tiny little snapshot of the things we're doing, but I trust that you're excited about this, that we are on this journey to take the gospel to the world. And Jesus said this gospel of the kingdom will be preached to all nations, to all people, and then the end will come.
And one more thing, I want to remind you that every one of you can be part of this great mission to the 1040 window. 12.5. And 100% of whatever you give will go to these projects. And not only that, we will double, dollar for dollar, everything you give. And for a few dollars more, for anyone giving $500 or more, we will send you out a free copy of my latest book, A Greater Perspective. So thank you for being part of this journey, and let's together reach the world with the gospel.